Good evening. Get a hymnal, pick up a hymnal and turn to 136. Are you washed in the blood? See if y'all know that one. 136. Stand and sing. First, second, and last verse. Have you been to Jesus for cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you walking daily by the Savior's side? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Do you rest each moment in the crucified? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Last verse. Lay aside the garments that are stained with sin and be washed in the blood of the Lamb. There's a fountain flowing for the soul unclean. No, be washed in the blood of the Lamb. Are you washed in the blood, in the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? You may be seated. As we get started tonight, we'll open it with a word of prayer. Jesse, will you lead us in a word of prayer, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you this evening. We just thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you for our service this morning. We just pray that we try each day to live our lives in a way that will bring honor and glory to you. Lord, we just ask for forgiveness for the times that we fail. We just pray that you will lead us and guide us and direct us in what we need to say and do. Lord, I ask that you would be with us this evening as we study your word. I just pray that when we leave that we have a better understanding of your word and we strive each day to live a more Christ-like life. I pray all this in your name.
Amen. Thank you so much. As far as announcements are concerned, not many announcements tonight, but the ladies will be cooking Wednesday, and to try to help some of those who are in need. So if you want to help with them, come on Wednesday, see Ivy or Tammy one, and I know they'll get you fixed right up. We're going to put off communion until March the 9th. Travis was supposed to be gone this weekend. We're going to set it for this weekend because of the wrestling tournament. He said, if you don't care, put it off a weekend. So we put it off to the 2nd, and guess what they did with the wrestling tournament? They moved it up to the 2nd. So Travis said, if you don't care, says, let's do it the 9th, okay? So anyway, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it on March the 9th. So since he's chairman of the deacons, we'll go along with Travis on that. Deacons meeting will be next week, not this coming week, but the week after next, on the Monday the 3rd at 7 o'clock, and then business meeting will be week after next on the 5th, and that will be at 6 o'clock. Are there any other announcements that we need to make? Okay, if not, Bobby? Take your hymnal and turn to 320. 320. Stand and sing. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. We'll do all three verses. earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Through death into life everlasting, he passed and we follow him there. Over us sin no more has dominion, for more than conquerors we are. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. His word shall not fail you, he promised. Believe him and all will be well. Then go to a world that is dying, his perfect salvation to tell. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Amen. You may be seated.
All right, before we get into our study tonight, we will take some prayer requests. I got a text message from Joey Yates. He was hoping his dad would get to be discharged today, but he did not. They found a blockage. They're going to do a heart cath tomorrow and possibly do a stent. Hopefully he will not have to have bypass, but Joey said one of the arteries was blocked pretty good. So just remember George Yates, if you would, in your prayers. Are there any others? Joan Jameson? Okay. Do what? Is she? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Gary has surgery tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Remember Gary Ratliff having surgery tomorrow.
Several in my family have this, whatever's going around. There's several in my family that has this spread that's going around. So just
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going around. Remember mine and Marcia's neighbor, Amy Lambert, she told me yesterday she was diagnosed with CLL, which is a leukemia. It's a chronic something leukemia, and she asked that we would pray for her, put her on our prayer list. I don't know much about it, but what she told me, the doctor said that if you're going to have leukemia, this is the best kind to have. So we just remember her, if you will.
Kenny Boyd that's on our prayer list, we need to lift him up to the families. He passed away.
Kenny,
Boyd.
okay.
That is Greg Calhoun's brother-in-law.
Who?
Greg Calhoun's brother-in-law.
Okay. Kenny Boyd family. Okay, anyone else?
Harold Mitchell, he's got cancer, but he's been in and out of hospital for a month. He's having trouble with his heart and breathing, but he's home now.
Okay. Any others? David Oakwind? Okay.
he's been in the hospital last week. They thought he had a heart attack. He's got a blood clot in his heart, but he's too weak. The heart's too weak. They're just going to have to try to solve it with
Okay.
Jody, if you don't care to put Sue Bowman's on the prayer list, that's Geraldine Bowman's daughter. Last I heard, I tried to get hold of Geraldine there this evening, and I couldn't get them. Their phone must be off or something. Last I heard, it's just in the Spokane County.
Okay, Sue Bowman? Okay.
Geraldine Bowman's daughter. Remember Geraldine in prayer too, she's not doing well.
All right, any others? Bobby O'Quinn, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we pause, and we thank you for what you've done for us today. God, we come to you now with open hearts, minds, and prayers for these names we've mentioned. Some that's having cancer, dementia, might have just the cold. God, we know that you know their concerns, you know their needs. And God, we just come to you now and just ask that your mercy, your kindness, and your healing power be upon them. God, there's plenty of things to pray about, whether it sometimes might be some situation in life, or it might be a stress or emotion. We pray for those that's going through some stressful times, some issues, just with again, God, there's no one better to come to you, God. We know that you can cure all and comfort all, and we just ask that you be with all those that's on our prayer list. God, and be with those, just the caretakers, those that travel with and watch over. Sometimes the struggles of being the caretaker is just as hard as the person. And God, we just also pray for the church and pray for our community. Pray for those that's in feeling discomfort from the flooding, whatever it may be, just power outage or water. God, we just thank you for the workers, for the Red Cross, for the caretakers that come out and work for these people. God, we pray for our outreach, little meal that we might be preparing. God, there's just so many things going on there. God, now we just turn them all over to you and just pray that your will be done. We ask for forgiveness for the times that we failed. Pray these things in Christ.
Thank you, sir. All right, if you have your notes, you got your Bible, we're going to, somebody dropped a piece of my favorite candy. How about that? These are the same notes that you had last time. However, you may get some different information as we go through. As a matter of fact, we're going to start out with information that you do not have at all. So what I want you to do is take the handouts and turn it on the back, and you have nothing there, right? I want you to write notes down tonight, okay? You're back in school again, right? Okay? So we're going to be taking notes, and we're going to be looking at some of the things of Daniel. You know, I don't know if you've been thinking about it, but look at everything that's going on in the Middle East right now. I mean, really, look at everything. Countries are being, of course, all those want to go after Israel. And so we know that there's always going to be a struggle over there until how long? Till Jesus comes back, okay? There will always be that struggle going on over there. So as we look at that, we are seeing history being fulfilled, or prophecy being fulfilled, okay? And so that's one of the things that the book of Daniel talks about, all right? When Daniel talks about prophecy, and, you know, Daniel is to the Old Testament what Revelation is to the New Testament prophetically, okay? When it talks about those things. So when we think about prophecy, that prophecy falls in two categories, okay? First one is fulfilled. And guess what the second one is? Unfulfilled. I spelled one different anyway. All right. So in Daniel, is everything fulfilled in Daniel? No. There's still a lot to be fulfilled in Daniel. Is there a lot fulfilled in Daniel? Yes, there is, okay? We see that. As a matter of fact, if you were to ask, there have been some people that Daniel's prophecy are so accurate that some people say that the Daniel of the Bible didn't write the book of Daniel, okay? Because they say it's too accurate to have been prophecy. They don't adhere to prophecy. They don't believe in prophecy necessarily. And so they think that somebody came in behind it, especially in chapter 11 when it talks about all the wars and all those things like that have happened now. And of course, we can go all the way back, but all those things have been fulfilled accurately, okay? So when we look at this, we think about Daniel. Now, how old was Daniel probably when he was taken captive? Probably around 15, somewhere between 14 and 17 years of age. And so we'll talk about in just a few minutes about the capture and the siege of Jerusalem, okay, in just a few minutes. But the one thing about Daniel, once he is taken captive and they take him to Babylon, he is there the rest of his life, okay? Now, the Bible doesn't tell us, and were Daniel's parents taken with him when he went? We don't know that. Probably not. Probably that once they came in and captured them, and that was in 605 BC. Those are some dates that you already have there. But they took these young men who were handsome, they were extremely intelligent, and so there was a reason for that. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes too. But Daniel lived there, he's there more than 70 years. After 70 years, Daniel discovered as he was reading the Bible that the bondage, the captivity for Judah would be 70 years. And Daniel was there the whole time. Now, God used Daniel. He had a plan for Daniel. And so that 9 out of the 12 chapters in here, that God reveals certain things through dreams and visions, okay? And we see that in here. So that was in 9 of the 12. But then God used Daniel. He was God's mouthpiece to reveal to the Gentile and the Jewish world what was going to take place from here to the end of time, okay? So God used Daniel to reveal all those things. Now, when we look at this, we know who the author is, okay? It's Daniel. Now, there's 2 other Daniels in the Bible, but don't get confused with them. This is the one true Daniel, okay? This is the prophet Daniel that God used, all right? And so as we see this, we see Daniel, that he is there. And so the book of Daniel, so the captivity of Judah by Babylon lasts to about 536 BC, okay? So they're captured in 605 BC, and it goes to about 536 BC, which is about what? 70 years. That's what the captivity was, okay? So Daniel probably wrote his book between 536 BC and 530 BC, all right? So we see that taking place. It was after everything had taken place that under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that Daniel recorded that. So let's look at the background. What's going on with Judah? Okay? Now, some things that we need to understand. But when we think about Judah, let's go all the way back 700 years. All right? And we look at when we look at the nation of Israel, where was the nation of Israel formed? In Egypt, okay? That's where the 12 tribes of Jacob are, Israel, okay? Jacob's name became Israel. So the 12 tribes of Israel were given birth in Egypt, okay? And so as we come through all that time, we come through that Israel finally came to the place that, and so how many tribes were in Israel? 12 tribes, okay? So when you have those 12 tribes of Israel, we come down to King Saul. Israel had no king, and what did the people of Israel say? They went to Samuel and said, we want to be like the other nation. We want a king. Was that God's plan? No, it was not God's plan. But they kept after Samuel, and so Samuel says, you know, they won't leave me alone. What do I need to do? He says, okay, get him a king. Okay? And so who did they choose? Saul. Okay? Saul was head and shoulders, literally, above everybody else. Okay? He was the person that you would look at and you would say he would be the leader. He would be the one, the man of authority and things like that. So we know that Saul was anointed king, okay? Now there came a point when Saul wanted to take things into his own hands, and God had told him something to do and he didn't do it. And he went and offered a sacrifice that he was not allowed to offer. And God didn't tell him to do that. But what he didn't do, Saul did not obey God when God told him to eliminate a whole nation, including the king and everybody else in that nation. I mean, just wipe them out. Saul almost did that. He didn't quite kill everybody. So what did God do? God said, okay. God was angry. He said, Saul's not going to be king much longer. So what did Samuel do? He goes to Jesse, the house of Jesse, not you. And so Jesse had all these sons, and God told Samuel that there in the house of Jesse, he was going to find the next king of Israel. And we know that he started out at the oldest, and he went down, and there were like 9 of the boys that were there, and there was one missing. And so as Samuel went through and looked at all of them, he refused all of them. He says, do you have any more? He said, yeah, I got one more out in the field. Who was that? King David, okay? So that brings us to, here's King David. Now, how long was it before David was anointed king before he actually became king? It was like 12 to 15 years, okay? So what happens is once Saul is disobedient, in that, you know, he is going to be replaced, that Saul goes out, and Saul and Jonathan and another one of his sons, and they go out into battle, and what happens to them? Well, Saul and Jonathan and the other son gets killed, okay? Now, the two kingdoms, there's two kingdoms that we see as far as when we talk about Israel. There was the northern kingdom, which was all of Israel except Judah. And then you had the southern kingdom, which was Judah. So you had 11 tribes in the northern kingdom, and you had one tribe in the bottom kingdom, okay? So once Saul is killed, one of his other sons becomes king of Israel, okay? Well, the people of Judah rebel, and they want David to be king, okay? So they make David king of Judah. So what happens then is that Saul's son is killed on purpose. He's murdered. And the elders of Israel come to David and said, David, we want you to be king of Israel also. That was in 1010 BC. So now we see the two tribes, the two kingdoms united again. Israel is one kingdom, okay? So it goes on for a while to 930 BC. That's 80 years go by. Then there's another split in the kingdom of Israel, and it splits exactly the same way. You have Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And so Rehoboam is the southern kingdom, which is Judah, and they split again. Okay? Now, in between this time, God has told Israel that he was going to bring judgment upon them. Okay? On all of Israel. Why? Because of their disobedience to God. Okay? And he said he was going to bring judgment upon them by having other countries come and capture them. So we see that it's going to take place. Did Israel listen to those prophets? No. They were disobedient. So then once the two kingdoms split again, the northern kingdom, we go on a couple of hundred more years, and around 1720 or 722 BC, the Assyrians come in and they capture the northern kingdom, which is Israel. So here, part of the judgment that God had pronounced on the whole nation of Israel has taken place. Okay? So we see Israel, the northern kingdom, is captured by Assyria in around 722. Now, Judah, which is the lower kingdom, they weren't captured yet. Okay? Now, there comes a time, we go another 100 years or so, and then we have Josiah. King Josiah, okay? King Josiah was the good king, okay? So what he was, he obeyed God. He got everybody back. They were having a revival in the nation of Judah, okay? That's what God was upset about, because they had turned away from him. Well, Josiah is leading the nation of Judah back into a revival and worshiping God. Well, in 609 BC, Josiah dies. And one of his sons, Jehoiakim, becomes king. And guess what? He rebels against God. Okay? That was in 609 BC. And he starts bringing Judah back into rebellion against God. So, in 605 BC is where we're at now. This is where Daniel is. So what happens? God has already told the nation of Judah that he is going to use Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, he told them, he named King Nebuchadnezzar, that he was going to come in and he was going to capture them. They were going to fall into captivity to the Babylonians. King Nebuchadnezzar. In 605, it takes place. Josiah's son, Jehoiakim, in 605 BC, that Babylon comes in and besieges the nation of Judah. Okay? They come into Jerusalem, and this is where we find Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay? Because what happens is that when they came in to capture the nation of Judah, is that they were going to take some of these Jewish boys back to Babylon. And so what they were going to do, they were going to use them, because what Nebuchadnezzar's plan was that he was going to bring more of those people in, and he wanted to indoctrinate them into the Chaldean lifestyle. Okay? And so in order to do that, he gets the brightest people that they can find in Jerusalem. And he brings them there for the very purpose, to start with, is that he is going to indoctrinate. He said they wanted people, that young men who were good looking, who were really smart, that could learn the language of the Chaldeans, that could learn the culture of the Chaldeans, and so that as other of the nation of Judah were brought in to Babylon, is that they would bring them in, and these that they had trained would indoctrinate, or a word that we see used a lot is brainwashed. Okay? So that's what they were doing. They were brainwashing. They wanted to brainwash Daniel and his buddies. And so Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego go into the first wave of the capture, the besiegement of Jerusalem, which is Judah, okay? And so they go in there and they take those back. And that was 605 BC. Then there is a second siege, because what happens is that Jehoiakim was king at that time, all right? So we go a few more years, and we come to 597 BC, and Jehoiakim's son becomes king, okay? And so, Nebuchadnezzar leaves him there, or actually becomes king before that, so he leaves him there for a little while, but what happens is, in 597 BC, is that Jehoiakim, the son, or the grandson of Josiah, rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. You think that was good? No. So what happens? Nebuchadnezzar comes in and he besieges Jerusalem again, okay? And here we have a second wave of people who go out. They take more into captivity and take them back to Babylon, which Jeremiah was one of those, okay? And so they go back with the same purpose. So then when there was the uncle of Jehoiakim, Zedekiah, he was the uncle, he becomes king. And then in 586 BC, he rebels against Nebuchadnezzar too. Guess what happens? Was Nebuchadnezzar happy? No. This time, what did he do? He destroyed Jerusalem. Okay? So there we see the history leading us to where we are in the study of Daniel. Daniel and his friends are in the first wave that is taking place. And so we see once that Judah is captured, then the captivity of all of Israel has now been fulfilled. The 11 northern kingdoms, which is the nation of Israel that is talked about, then the one southern kingdom, which is Jerusalem. Now they're all under captivity, because what happens is, in 622 BC, which is before Judah was, Nebuchadnezzar besieged Assyria. Assyria is the one that had captured Israel, 11. So what happens is that once that King Nebuchadnezzar comes in and captures Judah, then now you have all of Israel and Judah under the captivity of Nebuchadnezzar, which fulfills the judgment of God on the nation of Israel. Okay? God promised them, it took place. Now, when we look at that, there's several hundred years differences in all of this. And so God is working all those things out, okay? He promised them, God was going to do it. Can God use evil people to accomplish his purpose? Absolutely, okay? God can do that. So here we see those things taking place. And so that gives us a little background of what's going on. Now, there are certain things that we will be looking at as we study this book, the book of Daniel, okay? And if you look in your Bible, turn to Daniel chapter 2, in verses 20 through 22. And he says this, Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his, and he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells in him." Now go to verse 44. Verse 44 says, "And then in the days of the kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all the kingdoms, and it shall last forever." Okay? Now when we get to chapter 2, we'll We'll talk about all of that. But the main theme of Daniel is, the thing that's prominent over everything, is that God is a sovereign God who controls the affairs of all the rulers in all the nations. And that there's coming a final replacement of all the kings upon the earth with King Jesus when he comes back for his second coming, okay, at the end of the 7-year tribulation period. And then we have the 1,000-year millennial reign. And so as Daniel, we look at that, and that is the main theme. When we look at our world today, every time there is a king replaced or a president replaced, you think God is in charge of that. Absolutely, God is in charge of that. God has a plan. He will carry it out. He even uses evil kings to accomplish his purposes, okay? Because one of the other themes of Daniel is God either rules or he overrules, okay? But God is in control. God is sovereign. He will do exactly what he wants to do, okay? And he will accomplish what he sets out to do. So we see here that that's one of the themes. Now, there's a second theme in Daniel, too. If you were to think, I want you to think about this. Now, in the history of the Bible, there are certain eras of miracles. There are certain times. Are there miracles everywhere in the Bible? No. Okay? I mean, they're in a lot of places. But there are certain eras where the miracles are more prevalent than other times. Okay? So if we were to go back and were to look at the beginning of time, we look in Genesis and we go up through Deuteronomy, and what happened? There, God created the earth. God did miracles, right? And so we had those miracles that took place there. And that was all the way through the flood, because God, brought a flood on too, right? That was a miracle. Then there was the patriarchs and Moses, okay? Because in the time of Moses, there were miracles that were done then, right? I mean, Aaron and Moses were in front of Pharaoh and all those miracles. God split the Red Sea, and, he had a cloud and a fire, and he was watched over the nation of Israel after they were set free from captivity. Then we come to another time in the Old Testament when we had Elijah and Elisha, okay? And they were two prophets that were able to do miracles as well. Then we come to Jesus. And of course, did Jesus do miracles? Did any of the apostles do miracles? Yes, they did miracles too. So there was another era where they had miracles too. Now, and then we, of course, there's going to be a time in the second advent, in the tribulation period, will God do miracles again? Yes, he will, okay? And so now we see Daniel, will God do miracles with Daniel? The answer is absolutely yes, okay? Because he's going to reveal things to Daniel through visions and dreams about the things that are going to take place, prophecy, things that are going to take place in the future. And who does it mainly concern? Who does Revelation mainly concerns, and Daniel mainly concerns what? The nation of Israel, okay? That's what it's all about. It's all about the nation of Israel. Do we see that happen in the world today? Everything is focused where? On the Middle East. It's focused on Israel, okay? And so there's always been, ever since the Garden of Eden, Satan has always wanted to destroy the nation of Israel, because that was God. God sovereignly chose. You talked about the sovereignty of God, that he sovereignly chose Israel to be his chosen people, okay? Did they deserve it? No. But God decided that's who he was going to be, okay? And what were they supposed to do? They were supposed to glorify God. They were supposed to go to the other nations and tell them about the one true God, but what ends up happening? well, the other nations come in with their false gods, and Israel falls into their hands, okay? So here we see, even today, we see part of Daniel being fulfilled. Prophecy being fulfilled even today. Now, when we look at in Daniel, and then we look in Revelation 2, and it talks about the Antichrist, okay? Now, does anybody know who the Antichrist is? Do you think that the Antichrist could be alive today? Very possibly, right? Because when it talks about that the Antichrist will come out of those nations, that he will replace two of the kings that are there and take their place. Now, when you look in the Middle East today, what's happening over there? There's those nations, there could be a change, okay? The Antichrist may be alive today. He may be over there. He may be ready. At any time, Jesus Christ could come back for the rapture of the church. We need to be ready, okay? That's what does prophecy do? Prophecy tells us what's going to take place, and you know what? We need to be ready for that when it comes about. Okay? We don't need to be caught asleep. We don't need to be caught doing other things. We need to be ready so when Jesus comes, we'll be ready. Now, as we look into the book of Daniel, there's some things about Daniel. There's three things about Daniel that really stand out about his character, okay? So you can write these three things down. Three things that characterize Daniel's life, okay? And these really ought to be the same things that we look at in our lives. First of all, Daniel was a man of purpose, okay? Daniel was a man of purpose. We're looking in chapter 1. We're not going to get to chapter 1 tonight, but I'm giving you all this so you know when we get to chapter 1 what's going to take place. Daniel was a man of purpose. His purpose was what? His purpose was to serve God and always put God first regardless of the consequences, okay? We need to do the same thing. We need to put our faith and trust in God, be obedient to him, and leave the consequences to God, okay? We need to be obedient. We need to have a purpose in our life. Daniel was a man, he knew what his purpose was. He knew what he was supposed to do, and Daniel was obedient to that purpose. There was a song out a few years ago, and the name of the song was Dare to Be a Daniel, okay? Dare to be a Daniel. Be like Daniel, okay? He was a man of purpose. But the other thing that characterized Daniel's life was that he was a man of prayer, okay? Daniel believed in prayer. Did Daniel ever make a decision without praying to God? Not that's recorded, okay? Every time Daniel had to make a decision, what did he do? He went to God. Every decision that we make, we need to go to God. Now, does that mean even on our little decisions that we need to? Absolutely. We need to pray about everything. I heard a preacher say one time, man, I just about fell out of my seat. Preacher said there's certain things that you don't need to pray about. He says, and he said it this way, he says, if you want to buy a new car, and you got enough money to buy that new car, you probably don't need to pray about it. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? What if God wants you to take that money that you're going to buy that car with and use it to glorify him? We need to pray about before anything, whatever it is, even the smallest things in our life, we need to pray about, okay? We need to seek his wisdom, his guidance, his purpose in what he wants us to do. Daniel was a man of prayer. Even when Daniel knew that he was going to get in trouble for praying, what did Daniel do? He prayed. You know what? He opened the windows wide open so people could see him praying. He was not afraid. Because why? He trusted God. He put his faith in God. And then Daniel was a man of prophecy. God used Daniel. Now, we're not people of prophecy, okay, as far as will God use us to, prophesy about the future. No. Daniel was set out for that purpose. And so we see those things in Daniel's life and all those things that God wanted, that was going to accomplish, but he wanted to reveal to his people. Now we know that he didn't reveal everything to Daniel because it tells us in the last chapters, close the book. Okay? Close the book. Now when you get to Revelation, it doesn't say that. But Daniel does, because there's some things that are still yet probably to be revealed. So when we think about the sovereignty of God, what do you really believe about the sovereignty of God? Daniel believed in the sovereignty of God. He believed God had a purpose for every nation, for everything that was going on. That God was sovereign, God could do anything that he wants to. You think God is sovereign in your life? You think God is working things out in your life? If you believe Romans 8:28, for we know that God causes all things to work together for good, to those who are called according to his purpose, to those who love him, and to those who are called according to his purpose. God has a plan for our lives, okay? And do you believe that there is nothing in your life that can take place unless God allows it? Absolutely. I believe that with all my heart. That God, there's nothing Satan cannot do anything to you unless God allows it, okay? And so God is sovereign. That I believe that he is a loving God, that he is always looking out for me. Everything he does in my life is for his glory and my good. Same way in yours. And he did that with Daniel as well. Daniel believed that. Now, one of the things that we see in the book of Daniel, and even in our own lives, is that there's basically two tests in life, okay? Two tests in life. The first is the test of adversity. How many have been through adverse tests in your life? I have to raise both hands, okay? I mean, it's just been, those adverse tests. So what is the challenge when we have those adverse tests, that things happen to us and we say, what's going on? We don't understand. They're not good tests. They're adverse, okay? And so what the challenge to that is not to give in to despair. Now, if you look at Daniel, here's Daniel. He's taken out of his country. His parents were probably godly people, okay? Because Daniel knew God's will. He had a purpose in his own life. He was going to serve God. He didn't learn that on his own. He learned it from his family, okay? So here was Daniel at age probably around 15. He was taken away from his home, his parents, his country, his culture, his God. And so there's this test of adversity. Daniel could probably say, God, why did that happen to me? Did God have a purpose for that? He absolutely had a purpose for that, okay? So the challenge that we have is to make sure that we never doubt God's love and his power and his presence in our life in those times of adversity. There's sometimes that those things take place in our life that we just really want to give up sometimes, right? We don't understand what's going on. God, just take me on out of here, okay? So when we have those tests of adversity, we have to not turn our back on God, okay? Daniel did not turn his back on God. But then there's also the test of prosperity. And so what the challenge there is not to forget God. In other words, when everything is going good, you're up on the mountain, you got all the money you want, you're in good health, the family's doing good, there's no problems anywhere, and everything is going good. And what happens sometimes? We say, well, everything's going, I don't need God. I'm doing good on my own right now. And we tend to forget God during those times of prosperity. Okay? There was times in Daniel's life, even when he was in captivity, that what happened to Daniel? He was sort of like Joseph, was he not? What happened to Joseph? He got promoted, okay, even inside Egypt. So what happens to Daniel? Daniel gets promoted inside of Babylon, okay? And he moves right on up, and he's got everything he needs. Nebuchadnezzar's going to give him everything he needs. Why does he need God? So we have those two tests. And so we have to make sure in our own lives that when those two tests come up, that we always keep our eyes focused on God and God's purpose in our lives. Even when things are good, we stay focused on God. When things are bad, we stay focused on God. And so that's what Daniel did, okay? He focused on God. You know, it seems like every time that we are going through the adverse times in life that, God has our undivided attention. You know, we cry out to God, God, I need your help, I need your help, I need your help. When things are going good, we say, well, God, I'm all right. And so we understand that. Now, when you look at Daniel, was there anything special about Daniel? The answer is no. He was a normal person just like we are, which tells us what? God can use anybody, okay? Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter your background, doesn't matter about any of that God can use us and to accomplish his purpose. Now, the other thing too is that Daniel was tested by adversity and prosperity, both of those, okay? But the one thing that David did in all of that is he stayed resolute to God. His focus was always on God. And so, why? Why was he focused on God? Because he believed that God had everything in control. You believe God has everything in control? Absolutely. Even in the midst of a storm, in the midst of a flood, God is in control. We don't need to be afraid because God is in control. And so the big picture of Daniel as we look at it is that God is in control. And so now we come to chapter 1, and we're not going to get into chapter 1. We've got about 3 or 4 more minutes. But I want you to think in your own mind. Daniel was a young man, maybe 15 years of age. Go back in your life. Can you remember when you were 15? I can. Exactly when I turned 15. Why? Because at age 15, I could get my driver's license. Okay? Didn't have to be 15, 6 months. It was 15 years old, and you could get your driver's license, okay? I could remember the day I remember the first day after I got my driver's license, getting out on the road with my mom in that car. And let me tell you what, you talking about shaking, okay? My grandson, August, he turned 13 in August, but even when he was 12, I'll be on the vehicle behind the house driving, okay? He can drive a four-wheeler up and down the road and all that stuff like that too, okay? That never happened in my life. And when I turned 15, then I got my driver's license, then I could drive. But what if you can remember when you were 15 years of age, what was your spiritual life like? Where were you spiritually? In other words, if somebody came and captured you and took you off to another country, what would be your response to that? Because Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego had to make a decision, okay? Can you imagine being 15 years old in this foreign country, these foreign armies come in and take you, and they take you away from your mom and your dad and everything that you're used to. How do you respond to that? How do you what's the thought? What am I going to do? Am I going to be faithful to God? The one thing about Daniel was that no matter what it was, he was ready. He had good parents. He was brought up the right way. He believed God, and he believed God was in control and that God had a plan, okay? Now, it took me about 50 years to come to that conclusion, okay? But as we look at it, we see this taking place, that here was Daniel. And so, you know, how would Daniel fare? You think his parents were concerned about Daniel? Sure they were. They were concerned, you know. Will my son withstand what he encounters in Babylon? The pressures. Two things. And we'll talk about more of this next time. The last two things that we need to talk about tonight are this. It comes down to this. We talked about what were they going to do with Daniel. What was the one thing they wanted to do with those guys first when they brought them in? They were going to what? Brainwash them, okay? So Daniel had to make one of two decisions. One is he could conform. In other words, he could have let Nebuchadnezzar and all those people that were going to brainwash him, he could have conformed to what they wanted. Okay? Or he could be a conformer, or he could be a what? A transformer. What does Romans 12, verse number 2 say? Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Daniel could have been a conformer and given in. But what did Daniel do? He transformed the people that were around him, okay? He made a difference in other people's life. When we look at the world today, what is the world trying to get us to do? To transform to their culture, okay? To give into their ideals. To give into our God. And accept what they want us to believe, okay? We can either be conformed or we can transform them, okay? So we have that decision. The same decisions that Daniel had to make, we are making those decisions today. The good news is we see change taking place, okay? That we don't have to give in to the world, okay? It doesn't matter why. God is a sovereign God. When we go through the test of adversity, guess what? God is still with us. Can God bring good out of bad? He can still bring good out of bad. That no matter what we face, we have a God who is going to be with us, and he's going to see us through. But what do we need to do? We need to put our faith and trust in God. And he will see us through whatever we go through. Okay? All right. We're going to close there tonight. Anybody have any comments, any questions before we are dismissed? Yes?
At 15, you got your learner's permit.
The what?
You got your learner's permit at 15, right?
No, I got my driver's license at age 15.
Well, that's the reason they changed it for the rest of us.
Yeah, that's right.
They
That's
got
it.
all crashed out.
Chris, hey, Chris, but let me tell you something, Chris. Something I'm very proud of.
Okay.
I've been driving since I'm 15. I'm 75. 60 years of driving. You know how many tickets I've had?
Be careful.
I know. I know.
She ain't had none either, but she's needed a few.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I got to thinking, Sunday school lesson this morning, you talk about the world conforming, us to conform to them, and how evil this world is acting. And the first thing we read this morning said, if you follow my statutes,